The Abbotsford police station felt ordinary on that Tuesday afternoon. A few officers sat behind their desks, the rhythmic clatter of keyboards a soft counterpoint to the slow, deliberate tick of the wall clock. Through the large windows, the damp chill of the Fraser Valley air, carrying the scent of rain and distant farmland, seeped into the otherwise sterile room. That deceptive calm, however, was shattered when the main doors burst open. An elderly couple stumbled in, their faces etched with a panic so raw it silenced the room. The husband, Arthur Dubois, was a thin man, his frame still sturdy but his breath coming in ragged gasps. His hands trembled, searching for something to grip, to anchor himself against the wave of terror that threatened to pull him under. Beside him, his wife, Margaret, wept openly, her sobs muffled by the worn fabric of her scarf. Her steps were unsteady, as if her legs might give out at any moment. The constable at the front desk was on his feet in an instant, his expression shifting from bored duty to concerned focus as he guided them towards a set of chairs. At that same moment, a detective in a crisp but well-worn suit jacket was walking down the hallway. He was Detective Sergeant Liam O'Connell, a senior investigator with the Major Crime Unit, just returning from a tense meeting at the Crown Counsel's office. His eyes, accustomed to reading the subtle tells of deceit and distress, caught the couple's panicked expressions. A familiar, cold feeling settled in his gut. This wasn't a report about a stolen wallet or a noisy neighbor. This was something deeper, something that tore at the fabric of a family. O'Connell moved swiftly, opening the door to a small, private interview room. His voice was firm but carried an undercurrent of compassion. "Please come in and sit down. Take a deep breath and then tell me everything from the beginning." His words, meant to soothe, had the opposite effect. Margaret's composure broke completely. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with violent sobs that filled the small room, making the air feel heavy and tight. Arthur, though trying to remain strong, couldn't hide the tremor in his own voice. "Sergeant," he began, his words cracking with emotion, "you have to help us. Please, save our grandson." He paused, gathering his strength. "His name is Leo Dubois. He's been missing for 3 days. We know his stepmother, Isabel Morrow, did something to him." The room fell silent, the weight of the accusation hanging in the air like a storm cloud. O'Connell's eyes narrowed. He leaned forward slightly, piecing together the initial fragments of information. He'd handled dozens of missing teen cases. Most were runaways, sparked by trivial arguments, ending with an awkward reunion a few days later. But this felt different. The profound grief in Arthur's voice, the certainty behind his accusation, and Margaret's inconsolable weeping, it all pointed to something far more sinister. O'Connell gestured to a young officer to take detailed notes. He then looked directly at Arthur. "Tell me clearly, Mr. Dubois. When did Leo go missing? And why are you so certain his stepmother is involved?" Arthur took a long, shuddering breath and began to speak, his quiet voice laced with a mixture of sorrow and barely contained fury. 3 days ago, Leo hadn't shown up for school. His homeroom teacher, Mrs. Davison, had been the first to call. When the family tried his mobile, it went straight to voicemail. When they finally reached Isabel, her response was chillingly casual. She claimed Leo had thrown a tantrum because she wouldn't buy him the latest smartphone, and had stormed out of the house. "That's impossible," Arthur insisted, his voice rising. "We raised that boy since he was a toddler. We know his character. Leo isn't like that. He's polite, a good student, respectful. He wouldn't just run away." His hand clenched into a fist on the table. O'Connell listened intently, each word reinforcing his gut feeling that this was no simple runaway case. There was a darkness hiding behind the polished veneer of Isabel Morrow, the woman who now controlled the entire estate of her late husband, Jean-Luc Dubois. Outside, the sky opened up. A sudden downpour hammered against the roof of the station, the drumming noise a stark, chaotic backdrop to the quiet tragedy unfolding inside. The rain seemed to be washing the world clean, yet in this small room, O'Connell could feel the oppressive weight of a terrible secret, one carefully concealed by wealth and influence. He looked at the two elderly people before him, the lines on their faces telling a story not just of age, but of profound, recent pain. He inhaled deeply, his voice resonating with resolve. "All right, Mr. and Mrs. Du Bois. We are opening an official investigation. I promise you we will find Leo, and we will uncover the truth, whatever it may be." The words caused a fresh wave of tears to stream down Arthur's face. Margaret gripped her husband's hand tightly, a silent acknowledgement that their family's private nightmare had now become a major criminal investigation, one that threatened to shake their quiet Fraser Valley community to its core. The rain continued to lash against the windows of the interview room long into the evening, the rhythmic drumming a somber soundtrack to the couple's grief. The fluorescent lights cast long, stark shadows on the walls as O'Connell delved deeper. Margaret's tears had subsided into a weary silence, while Arthur, though exhausted, repeated his conviction with unwavering certainty. That boy would never run off just because of a phone. He was a good kid, quiet but with big dreams. He loved his school, he loved us. There's something else going on here, Sergeant. Something dark. O'Connell listened, his pen scratching across his notepad. He had handled countless cases, but the sheer, unadulterated pain of these grandparents struck a chord. This wasn't speculation born of dislike for a new daughter-in-law, it was a deep, instinctual certainty. He asked who else lived in the house with Leo. "Just him and his stepmother," Arthur replied, his voice barely a whisper. "Isabel Moreau. Ever since his father, our son Jean-Luc, passed away last year, that big house has felt more like a prison for our grandson." The name Isabel Moreau was underlined twice in O'Connell's notes. He was vaguely familiar with the Du Bois family. Jean-Luc had been a successful poultry farmer, building a small local operation into a significant enterprise in the valley. After his first wife died, he had remarried Isabel, a woman known for her striking beauty and sharp ambition. Not long after the wedding, Jean-Luc's health had declined rapidly, culminating in a sudden, fatal heart attack. In the aftermath, Isabel had become the sole administrator of the family's considerable assets, with 16-year-old Leo listed only as the eventual heir, his inheritance locked in a trust he couldn't access until he came of age. The pattern was disturbingly familiar to O'Connell. He'd seen it before in other cases, where there was significant wealth, family disputes could curdle into unimaginable tragedies. But as an investigator, he knew he couldn't operate on hunches alone. He needed hard evidence. He turned his attention to Margaret, who was staring blankly at the wall. "Mrs. Du Bois," he said gently, "please, try to stay calm. We're going to conduct a thorough investigation. Can you help us with any detail, no matter how small? Sometimes the most trivial things become the key." Margaret nodded slowly, her mind drifting back. She recalled how, over the past few months, Leo had often complained about his stepmother's behavior. Isabel was never outwardly cruel, no shouting or hitting, but she controlled his life with an iron fist. His allowance was strictly monitored, his social activities had to be reported, and his dream of attending university out of province was met with cold, unyielding resistance. He said he felt like a stranger in his own home, Margaret whispered, her voice trembling. Like he was just a guest, waiting to be asked to leave. This information solidified O'Connell's suspicion that there was a serious rift within the household. He began formulating a strategy in his mind. First, he would need to build a clearer picture of Leo's life by speaking to his teachers and friends at school. Second, he would have to put Isabel under discreet surveillance. Her unnerving calm was a massive red flag. Third, he would get his tech team to pull all of Leo's digital data to trace his last known movements. The night grew deeper, but for O'Connell, the case was just beginning. He knew the path to the truth would be winding and treacherous, obscured by carefully constructed lies. As the grandparents finally left, leaning on each other for support as they walked back out into the rainy night, O'Connell felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just investigating a disappearance anymore, he was fighting for a boy who, by all accounts, had no one else to fight for him. The next morning, the sky over Abbotsford was a blanket of grey. A fine mist hung in the air, making the road slick and the landscape look like a watercolor painting. An unmarked police car moved quietly through the city streets, heading towards Fraser Valley Secondary, the school Leo Dubois attended. In the passenger seat, Detective Sergeant Liam O'Connell reviewed his notes. Leo Dubois, age 16. Missing 3 days. Sole heir to the Dubois poultry fortune. Living with stepmother, Isabel Moreau. In the back, 2 other members of his team sat in tense silence. Before they arrived, O'Connell gave a brief instruction. We're just conducting preliminary interviews. No warrant for a search yet. Watch for tells, note every detail. Don't take anything at face value. They all nodded in understanding. The school was a hive of activity. Students laughed and joked in the hallways, their vibrant energy a stark contrast to the empty desk in a grade 10 science classroom. That desk belonged to Leo. For 3 days, it had remained unoccupied. The school principal met them with a worried expression and led O'Connell to the staff room. Leo is a good kid, he said quietly. He has a solid academic average, he's polite, never causes any trouble. We find it hard to believe he'd just run away. O'Connell nodded and asked to speak with Leo's homeroom teacher, Mrs. Davison. A woman in her 40s with a kind, weary face entered the room. She was known to be close with Leo. In a soft voice, she explained that after his father's death, Leo had become more withdrawn, but in the last couple of months, he had seemed more optimistic and driven. He was always talking about his future, about university, she said. In my opinion, there's no way he would just leave all that behind. Her words strengthened O'Connell's conviction. He then asked to speak with some of Leo's closest friends. A few students were brought to the guidance counselor's office, a more private setting where they might speak freely. The first to enter was Noah Chen, Leo's best friend and desk mate. His face was pale, but he spoke with a calm certainty. Sir, I don't believe Leo ran away, he stated firmly. Yeah, he was always annoyed with his stepmom, Isabel, but he had big plans. He told me once, just gotta wait till I'm 19, then I can finally make my own decisions. O'Connell leaned forward. Did you speak to him the day before he disappeared? Yeah, that afternoon, Noah replied. He'd had another fight with Isabel about his university plans. He was really down about it, but he was still joking around with me before he left. It makes no sense that he'd be gone the next morning without a trace. This testimony further cemented the idea that Leo had not left willingly. O'Connell scribbled in his notepad, then asked, if he were to leave, what would he absolutely have taken with him? His laptop and his collection of graphic novels, Noah answered without hesitation. He never went anywhere without them. But I heard they're both still in his room. That's why I know he didn't just leave on his own. That simple piece of information felt more significant than a mountain of circumstantial evidence. After Noah, several other friends were interviewed. They all gave similar accounts. Leo was a good kid, devoted to his grandparents, with clear ambitions. None of them believed he had simply run away. But when it was the turn of a quiet girl named Chloe, Leo's cousin, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Chloe seemed hesitant, her eyes fixed on the floor for a long time, before she finally pulled a small object from her pocket. It was a USB drive. Sir, this is Leo's, she said, her voice barely audible. He gave it to me last week. He told me if anything ever happened to him, I should hold on to it. The room went silent. O'Connell accepted the small device, his heart pounding. He knew that teenagers rarely made such dramatic gestures, unless they felt a genuine sense of danger. Chloe continued in a whisper. The night before he disappeared, Leo sent me a text message. It said, "Don't be scared if weird things start happening at the house. Just please look after Grandpa and Grandma for me." Those words struck O'Connell like a physical blow. A 16-year-old boy, feeling the need to protect his elderly grandparents from a threat inside his own home. After the interviews, O'Connell walked out into the school hallway and paused for a moment in front of Leo's empty classroom. The quiet of the empty desk, surrounded by the lively chatter of other students, felt profoundly heavy. On the drive back to the station, he stared out at the lush green fields of the valley, but his mind was focused on one thing: Leo Dubois never intended to run away. His last message was a clear sign that he felt he was in real and immediate danger. That afternoon, at the temporary command post set up at the Abbotsford station, a specialized cybercrime unit was brought in. "A kid Leo's age lives on his phone and social media," O'Connell said to the team. "If he really ran away, he'd have left a digital footprint. If he didn't, it means that footprint was deliberately erased." A few hours later, the initial results came in. According to the cell carrier's data, Leo's last call was at 9:15 p.m., a brief chat with Noah. After that, there was no activity. The phone's last signal ping was at 10 p.m., from the cell tower that covered his own neighborhood. After that, the phone was turned off. The room fell silent again. The data confirmed that Leo had vanished from the vicinity of his own house. "Sir, we found a short note in an automated cloud backup from his memo app," an analyst named Daria reported. The words on the screen were short, but they made everyone in the room freeze. They read, "I feel trapped. If something happens to me, the answer is in this house." O'Connell bowed his head for a long moment, the simple words echoing in his mind like a child's final scream for help. He clenched his fist. "Leo," he whispered to himself, "we heard you. We're going back to that house, and this time, we won't be leaving empty-handed." The following afternoon, the sky over the Fraser Valley remained a gloomy, overcast gray. A light drizzle had been falling since morning, leaving puddles on the rural roads that wound their way toward the Dubois property. The unmarked police car moved slowly, passing rain-slicked fields and modest farmhouses. In the distance, perched on a rise overlooking the valley, the Dubois family home came into view. It was a large, modern house, its clean white walls and dark red roof standing in stark contrast to the rustic landscape. A tall fence encircled the sprawling property, which included meticulously manicured gardens and, further back, the long, low buildings of the poultry farm. The car had barely come to a stop in the driveway when a woman appeared on the porch. It was Isabel Moreau. She wore a tailored navy blue dress, her makeup was subtle, her hair perfectly styled. A welcoming smile was painted on her lips, a smile that felt far too composed for a woman whose stepson had been missing for 3 days. "Good afternoon, officers," Isabel greeted them, her voice smooth as silk. "Please come in. I know my late husband's parents must be worried sick. But trust me, Leo is just being a teenager. He'll come home when he's cooled off." O'Connell responded with a curt nod. He sensed a practice performance behind her display of hospitality. Her smile felt more like a mask than an expression of genuine emotion. The living room was impeccably furnished, with plush leather sofas, large abstract paintings on the walls, and fresh flowers in every corner. Yet, the atmosphere was cold and sterile, like a showroom rather than a family home. O'Connell chose a seat directly opposite Isabel. In a calm, measured tone, he began the interview. "Ms. Morrow, we've received a report that Leo has been absent from school for 3 days. Can you tell us what you know?" Isabel sighed dramatically, her face a carefully crafted mask of concern. "We had a small disagreement. He wanted something that I felt was unnecessary, so he got angry and left with a bag. I assumed he was staying at a friend's house. You know how teenagers can be." O'Connell held her gaze, his eyes sharp. "What did he take with him when he left?" Isabel gestured to a housekeeper, who promptly appeared with a black backpack. He packed this. It has some clothes and personal items. That's why I was so sure he left on his own. O'Connell took the bag and opened it. Inside were a few folded t-shirts and a toiletry kit, but his mind immediately snagged on what was missing. Leo's laptop wasn't there. Neither was his prized collection of graphic novels. The very things a teenager would consider essential were conspicuously absent. "Have you tried contacting his friends?" O'Connell asked. Isabel gave a slight, awkward smile. "I don't really know who his friends are." Leo was always very private. It was difficult for O'Connell to believe that a mother, even a stepmother, would be so completely ignorant of her stepson's social circle. That total lack of knowledge suggested a profound and deliberate distance between them. While the interview continued, 2 other officers asked for permission to see Leo's room. The space was tidy, the bed made, the desk covered in textbooks. The laptop was sitting on the desk, its charger still plugged into the wall. A row of Japanese manga was neatly arranged on a shelf. On a small side table was a framed photo of Leo with his biological mother, who had passed away years ago. One of the officers quietly radioed O'Connell. "Sir, if he ran away, he would have taken his laptop and his favorite books. They're all still here." O'Connell nodded imperceptibly. These small, disparate pieces were forming a picture that completely contradicted Isabel's story. After nearly an hour, he concluded the interview. He stood up, his expression unreadable. "Thank you for your time, Ms. Morrow. We will continue our investigation. In the meantime, please remain available in case we need to contact you." Isabel smiled sweetly, as if relieved. "Of course, Sergeant. I won't be going anywhere. I do hope Leo comes back soon." But as O'Connell and his team walked out, he could feel her eyes on his back. There was something in her gaze, not the concern of a worried parent, but the smug confidence of someone who believed she had an answer for every question. In the driveway, O'Connell paused. His team waited for instructions. In a low voice, he commanded, "Starting tonight, I want surveillance on this house. 2 officers, rotating shifts, 24/7. I don't want a single movement in or out of this property to go unnoticed." One of the younger officers asked hesitantly, "Sir, she seems so calm. Is it possible she's telling the truth, that she really believes he'll be back?" O'Connell looked back at the large house on the hill. From a distance it looked elegant, but up close it felt cold and lifeless. "No parent is that calm when their child has been missing for 3 days, he said softly. "That kind of calm isn't resignation. It's the sign of someone hiding something." The police car pulled away, descending the gravel road. In his rearview mirror, O'Connell saw Isabel still standing on the porch, waving with a faint smile. It was a smile that seemed permanently affixed to her face, a chilling testament to her belief that her plan, whatever it was proceeding perfectly. O'Connell took a deep breath. He knew the game had just begun, and the opponent he faced was not an ordinary person, but a woman who was carefully guarding a dark secret behind a facade of charm and grace. The first night of surveillance on the Dubois estate was quiet. 2 plainclothes officers sat in an unremarkable sedan parked down the road, disguised as a couple on a late-night call, their position giving them a clear view of the property's entrance. Their initial report was mundane. Isabel followed a predictable routine: a trip to the local market in the morning, a meeting with a feed supplier in the afternoon, and watering flowers in the garden before dusk. The house lights went out at precisely 10 p.m. There were no signs of panic, no frantic phone calls, no effort to search for her missing stepson. It was all too normal. Reading the report the next morning, O'Connell frowned. If her stepson had really run away, a parent would be frantic, he muttered to his team. Calling friends, driving around town, plastering posters. She wouldn't be this placid. This level of calm is dangerous. The following day, O'Connell decided to do some reconnaissance himself. Dressed in a worn jacket and a baseball cap, he walked the public trails that bordered the back of the large property. From behind a thicket of blackberry bushes, he could see Isabel in the yard of the poultry farm, giving clear, firm instructions to her workers. Her movements were efficient, her expression composed. She looked more like a focused CEO than a grieving mother. His gut feeling grew stronger. People hiding immense secrets often overcompensated with an appearance of absolute normalcy. He continued his walk, circling around to the rear of the farm. The long chicken barns stood in neat rows, the air thick with their earthy, pungent smell. His steps faltered, however, when he noticed a separate, smaller building at the far end of the property. It was a concrete-walled shed with a heavy steel door, looking far more solid than the adjacent barns. A faint, sharp chemical odor wafted from a small ventilation slit near the roof. O'Connell approached casually, stopping to chat with an old farmhand, Stan Kowalski, who was filling a water trough. "Hey there. What's that shed used for?" The old man glanced over his shoulder before replying in a low voice. "That's where the industrial feed grinder is. Usually only runs during the day. It's always locked up tight at night. But lately there's been a strange smell coming from it even when it's not in use." That brief answer sent a jolt through O'Connell. He thanked the man and walked away quickly, not wanting to arouse suspicion. But in his mind, he had marked that shed as the most critical point of interest on the entire property. That evening, back at the command post, O'Connell drew a rough map of the estate on a whiteboard. He wrote 2 words in large letters, "Back shed." "This is where her secret is hidden, I can feel it," he told his team. "We don't have legal grounds for a search yet, so we have to be patient. But starting tonight, I want all surveillance focused on that shed." The following days, the surveillance intensified. The reports that came in were increasingly strange. Nearly every night, well after dark, Isabel would go out to the back of the property. She carried a bucket of water and a bottle of industrial-strength cleaner, and would methodically wash the concrete pad around the shed. Afterward, she would unlock the heavy steel door, go inside for a few minutes with a flashlight, and then emerge with the same serene expression. One of the officers on duty whispered over the radio, "Sir, this is weird. If it's just a feed shed, why is she scrubbing the floor around it every single night?" O'Connell's voice was tense. "Log every detail. Don't approach. We need to wait for the right moment." On the 3rd night of focused surveillance, his suspicion found solid ground. Just before 11 p.m., his handheld radio crackled to life. "Sir." The light in the shed just came on. The officer's voice was strained. From their vantage point, they could see Isabel's silhouette entering the shed. She was wearing a dark, full-length rain slicker, even though the night was clear and dry. The steel door closed firmly behind her. A moment later, they heard the faint, grinding hum of a heavy machine, followed by brief flashes of light from the ventilation slit. Half an hour passed. The light went out. Isabel emerged, her movements calm and unhurried, her face still a blank mask. As if what she had just done was nothing more than a routine chore. The detailed report landed on O'Connell's desk before dawn. He read each line, his heart pounding. That shed. What in God's name is she doing in there in the middle of the night? He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. All the clues were pointing to one terrifying conclusion. Leo Dubois never left his home. And that shed at the back of the poultry farm wasn't just for grinding feed. He was certain it held the key to the entire mystery, a secret Isabel was trying desperately to wash away. The next morning, the atmosphere at Fraser Valley Secondary was somber. Leo's chair remained empty. His friends' faces were etched with worry. Noah, his best friend, came to the police station with a new piece of information. He showed O'Connell the last text message he had received from Leo, sent on the night he disappeared. It read, "Pray for me, Mun. If something happens tomorrow, Please tell my grandparents I love them. O'Connell read the message twice. The simple words felt like a final goodbye, perfectly aligning with the digital evidence showing Leo's phone signal had vanished from his own property. O'Connell whispered to himself, "Leo, we're getting closer. No secret can stay buried forever." That night, the surveillance team was back in position, disguised as late-night coffee drinkers in a Tim Hortons with a view of the road leading to the Dubois estate. A report came in over the radio, "Sir, target is entering the shed again. This time she's been in there longer than before." O'Connell clenched his fist. Every move Isabel made was tightening the net around her, reinforcing his belief that the truth he was seeking lay behind the grim, concrete walls of that shed. On the 5th day of Leo's disappearance, the tension at the Abbotsford Police Command Post was palpable. The reports from the cybercrime unit, teachers, and friends were coalescing into a single, disturbing narrative. Every person interviewed agreed, Leo was not the type of teenager to run away without a compelling reason. His grades were good, his friendships were strong, and he had a clear, ambitious plan to attend university out of province. Daria, from the cybercrime team, presented her latest findings on a large monitor. "Sir, Leo's last call was at 9:15 p.m., a short conversation with his friend Noah. After that, no further activity. His phone pinged the local cell tower until 10 p.m., placing him within a 500-meter radius of his house, then it went completely dead." O'Connell listened, his brow furrowed. The evidence was irrefutable, Leo never truly left home. He had vanished from within the confines of his own property. Daria then added a startling new detail. "We recovered a final, automatically synced note from his cloud account, saved just minutes before his phone was powered off." O'Connell leaned in to read the text on the screen. "I feel trapped. If something happens to me, the answer is in this house." A heavy silence fell over the room. The words felt like a posthumous cry for help, a clue left by a boy who knew his time was running out. O'Connell closed his eyes for a moment, then said quietly, "Leo, we heard you. We're going back to that house, and this time, we won't leave empty-handed." Meanwhile, the surveillance team reported a different kind of activity. "Sir," an officer radioed in, "target is on the move. She's in her personal vehicle, not heading to the market. We're following at a distance." Isabel's car drove not to the local grocery store, but into the heart of Vancouver, stopping outside a chic cafe in Gastown. From across the street, the undercover officer watched as she sat down with a well-dressed man in a sharp suit. The officer managed to get a few discreet photos. That evening, the photo was on O'Connell's desk. When he zoomed in, he recognized the man's face instantly. It was Marcus Thorne, a high-profile lawyer known for his expertise in handling contentious inheritance and estate cases. The meeting lasted for nearly 2 hours. Isabel appeared to be in a serious discussion, occasionally jotting down notes while Thorne spoke at length. As they parted ways, Isabel slipped a thin file folder into her expensive handbag. The full report was compiled at the command post that night. O'Connell stood before a large whiteboard, kinning up the photo of Isabel and Marcus Thorne, connecting them with a bold red line. "Her stepson is missing," O'Connell said, his voice heavy with contempt, "but the person she meets is an estate lawyer. What is she preparing for?" Daria offered a chilling explanation. "If Leo can be declared legally missing, and eventually presumed dead, the path for her to inherit the entire estate becomes much clearer. This meeting has nothing to do with finding a lost child." O'Connell nodded slowly, though he knew this was still just a theory. Without physical evidence, a skilled lawyer like Thorne could spin any narrative he wanted. Over the next few days, more reports trickled in. The nightly ritual continued, Isabel, carrying water and cleaning fluids, meticulously washing the concrete area around the small shed. She would always use her own key, slip inside for a short time, and then re-emerge. Her strange behavior didn't go unnoticed by the neighbors either. Mrs. Gable, who ran a small produce stand down the road, mentioned it to an officer posing as a customer. It's odd, you know. Her boy is gone, but Mrs. Morrow never once asked any of us if we'd seen him. Just says he's away visiting friends. Gives me the shivers, it does. These small observations from the community further solidified the picture O'Connell was building. Isabel was trying to project an image of normalcy, but her very calmness was the most suspicious thing about her. On the 7th night since Leo vanished, the team gathered again. On the whiteboard, Isabel's photo was now linked to Marcus Thorne's name, with a large question mark drawn over the words "back shed." O'Connell summarized their position. The facts are clear. Leo was last seen entering his home around 9 p.m. His phone signal died an hour later, still on the property. Since then, not a single trace. Meanwhile, Isabel is meeting with lawyers and obsessively cleaning a shed in the middle of the night. It's all connected. His team stared at the board, the grim reality of the case settling upon them. But O'Connell cautioned them. To take the next step, we need a break. A witness, a new piece of evidence. Until we get it, stay sharp. Don't let your guard down. Outside, a light rain began to fall again, slicking the streets of the quiet town. From the window of the command post, O'Connell looked out into the darkness, in the direction of the large house on the hill. He knew time was not on their side. Isabel was not a fool. If she was indeed hiding a dark secret, every passing day made the trail colder. He whispered into the silence of the room, "Hang in there, Leo. We're waiting for our chance. And when it comes, there won't be any locked doors that can hide the truth." On the morning of the 8th day, the atmosphere at the Abbotsford Police Command Post shifted dramatically. A middle-aged man in worn work clothes sat nervously in the waiting area, twisting a worn-out baseball cap in his hands. He kept his eyes fixed on the floor, as if he was on the verge of bolting. O'Connell, emerging from a briefing, noticed him immediately. "Who's this?" he asked the desk sergeant. "Name's Stan Kowalski, sir." Said he's a former employee at the Dubois farm. Insisted on speaking directly with you, the officer replied. O'Connell nodded quickly. "Bring him in. Mr. Kowalski, please have a seat. What can I do for you?" Stan took a deep, shaky breath, and when he spoke, his voice was hoarse with anxiety. "I can't keep quiet anymore, Sergeant. The night that boy, Leo, disappeared, I saw something. I was too scared to say anything before, but it's been eating me up inside. I'm afraid that secret will get buried with him." O'Connell leaned forward, his focus absolute. "Just tell me what you saw. We will ensure your protection." Stan looked down at his calloused hands and began his story. "That night, I had to go back to the farm around 11 o'clock. Left a tool behind in one of the barns. As I was cutting across the back field, near the processing shed, I saw the lights were on. That was strange because it's always locked up tight after 5. "What did you see?" O'Connell asked gently. "I hid behind a stack of feed bags. Through a dirty window, I could see her clear as day. Mrs. Morrow. She was inside, wearing one of those plastic rain slickers. Had gloves on. And the worst part, one could hear the big feed grinder roaring away in the dead of night. She was pouring buckets of water into it, scrubbing the inside parts. Her face was tense. It gave me the chills, sir." O'Connell's gaze sharpened. "Are you absolutely certain it was Ms. Morrow?" "I worked on that farm for years. I know what she looks like. It was her, no doubt about it. I got scared and left as fast as I could," Stan said, his voice dropping to a whisper. A heavy silence filled the room. This new piece of testimony was the missing link, the piece that connected all the disparate parts of the puzzle O'Connell and his team had assembled over the past week. "Why are you only reporting this now?" he asked carefully. Stan sighed, a long, weary sound. I was afraid, sir. Mrs. Morrow, she's a hard woman. I was worried if I said something, I'd lose my job. But a few days ago, she called me into her office out of the blue. Said I was getting too old and slow, and fired me on the spot with 1 month's severance. It felt like she was trying to get rid of me, to make sure I kept my mouth shut. O'Connell stood up and walked to the large whiteboard. There, alongside the photos of Isabel and her lawyer, and the words "back shed," he added a new note in red marker, "Witness, Stan Kowalski." He turned back to his team. This is what we've been waiting for. Direct testimony that puts her in the shed on the night Leo disappeared, operating a heavy machine, and cleaning something. And the very next week, she fires the only person who could have seen her. Daria, from the cybercrime unit, added, with this testimony, we have more than enough probable cause to apply for a search warrant. O'Connell nodded, his expression grim and determined. Exactly. We can't delay any longer. We have to find out what she was hiding in that shed. He turned back to Stan. Thank you for your courage, Mr. Kowalski. Don't worry. We will protect you. Your voice is crucial in finding the truth. Stan looked up, his eyes glassy with unshed tears. Leo was a good kid, sir. He'd always say hello to me in the mornings. I couldn't live with myself if I just let him disappear without a trace. O'Connell placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Trust me, the truth is about to come out. That afternoon, O'Connell meticulously prepared the warrant application. He wove together every thread: the digital forensics, the testimony from teachers and friends, Isabel's unnervingly calm demeanor, her meeting with the estate lawyer, her suspicious nightly activities at the shed, and now, the damning eyewitness account from a fired employee. As he finished, he glanced at the clock. The sky outside was beginning to bruise with the colors of sunset, and a light rain had started to fall again. O'Connell closed the thick file with a sense of finality. Tomorrow morning, we're getting the warrant. Once that shed door is officially open, all of her secrets will be exposed. The team nodded in unison. They all knew a major breakthrough was imminent. That night, O'Connell once again read Leo's final, desperate note on his laptop screen. He didn't read it aloud, but let the weight of the words settle in his heart. Just hold on, kid, he whispered. We're almost there. Your secret is about to be told. The morning air in Abbotsford still carried the earthy scent of overnight rain. Inside his office, Detective Sergeant Liam O'Connell sat with a resolute expression, the thick file containing a week's worth of painstaking investigation lying before him. The witness statements, the digital forensics, the timeline of Leo's disappearance, and Stan Kowalski's crucial testimony, it all formed the final piece of a grim puzzle. He closed the folder slowly and looked at his assembled team. Today's the day, he said, his voice steady. No more waiting. The evidence is solid. We're getting the search warrant. By late morning, he was at the Crown Counsel's office. The room was quiet, the only sound the ticking of a clock on the wall. A senior Crown prosecutor took the file from O'Connell's hands, his expression neutral as he reviewed the contents page by page. His brow furrowed slightly as he read Stan Kowalski's statement about the back shed. After a long pause, he closed the file and looked directly at O'Connell. He nodded once. The argument is clear, the evidence is compelling. On behalf of the Crown, the warrant is granted. He pressed his signature onto the document, the red ink of the official stamp a stark contrast against the white paper. O'Connell accepted the signed warrant, his heart pounding. This was more than a legal document, it was the key that would unlock the truth. By late afternoon, the police station parking lot was filled with the low rumble of idling vehicles. Members of the major crime unit donned tactical vests, while a forensic team prepared cases filled with specialized equipment. O'Connell stood before them, his voice ringing with authority. We are executing a search warrant on Isabel Morrow's property tonight. Remember, our job is not just to find evidence, but to find an answer for a missing boy. Be meticulous. One small detail could be the key to everything. The officers responded in unison, "Yes, sir." The convoy of vehicles moved out as dusk began to settle, the quiet rural roads disturbed by their procession. Neighbors peeked out from their windows, wondering at the sudden, heavy police presence. When the convoy arrived, the large Du Bois house looked imposing and cold in the fading light. Isabel was standing on the porch, dressed in a simple house dress. Her face showed a flash of shock at the sight of a dozen officers descending on her property, but she quickly composed herself, forcing a thin smile. O'Connell strode forward, holding up the official document. "Isabel Morrow, we have a warrant to search this entire property, including all buildings and outbuildings." Isabel's face paled, but she maintained her composure. "Go ahead, Sergeant. My home is open. I have nothing to hide." Her words were polite, but O'Connell saw the flicker of panic in her eyes, the anxiety she tried to conceal behind her smile. The search began in the main house, living room, bedrooms, kitchen, storage areas. Everything was neat, almost clinically so. The team documented and photographed but found nothing out of the ordinary. Finally, they moved to the back of the property. In the corner of the lot stood the dull, concrete shed with its heavy, locked steel door. O'Connell turned to Isabel. "Please unlock this shed." She hesitated for a split second before retrieving a key from her pocket. "It's just a shed for the chicken feed." "There's nothing special in there," she said, her voice noticeably quieter than before. The moment the steel door creaked open, a wave of damp air mixed with a sharp, chemical scent washed over them. The concrete floor was wet, as if it had just been hosed down. The forensic team moved in immediately, pulling on gloves and masks before switching on their UV lights. The purple glow swept across the walls and floor. Slowly, faint stains began to appear, subtle spatters on the walls, thin lines near the floor drains, and even a few marks on the ceiling near the massive feed grinder that dominated the center of the room. "Sir, we've got fluorescence at multiple points. Likely biological fluid residue," one of the technicians reported. O'Connell moved closer, his eyes narrowed. "Take samples of everything. Document it all." The grinder itself looked far too clean for a piece of machinery that should be in regular, heavy use. The team carefully began to dismantle parts of its interior. From a small, hard-to-reach crevice, they found a dark, sticky residue. A sterile swab was used to collect a sample, which was then sealed in an evidence tube. They weren't finished. Two other officers pried open the grate of the drainage channel behind the machine. A putrid, foul odor immediately filled the air. Trapped in the metal grate were several strands of dark hair. The discovery brought a sudden, chilling silence to the shed. Everyone present knew that this small, seemingly insignificant find could be the linchpin of the entire case. O'Connell took a long, deep breath and spoke with firm authority. "That's enough. The evidence is clear. Seal this building." Isabel stood in the doorway, her face now a deathly shade of white. Her hands clutched a small purse, her body trembling almost imperceptibly. She tried to speak. "That's just spoiled feed, Sergeant. Don't misinterpret things." O'Connell stared at her for a long moment, his expression cold as ice. "You can provide your explanation at the station. Tonight, you're coming with us." Two female officers stepped forward and escorted a stunned Isabel, who offered no resistance. Her entire facade of control, so carefully maintained for over a week, had shattered the moment that shed door opened. Outside the gates, a small crowd of neighbors had gathered, whispering anxiously as they watched Isabel being led into a police car. Some shook their heads in disbelief, while others murmured, "Finally, the truth is coming out." O'Connell stood in the light drizzle, looking back at the grand house now cordoned off with yellow police tape. He knew this search was just the beginning. The evidence was collected, but the full story of what really happened to Leo Dubois was still waiting to be told. That night, the interrogation room at the Abbotsford police station felt cold and stark. A single fluorescent light hummed overhead, casting a harsh glare on the long wooden table that separated Detective Sergeant Liam O'Connell from Isabel Moreau. She sat composed, dressed in the plain grey sweatsuit provided by the station. Though her face was pale, her eyes were still sharp, as if challenging anyone who dared to unravel her secrets. Across from her, O'Connell opened a thick file filled with photographs and notes. Two other detectives flanked him, ready to document every word. He began in a low, firm voice. "Ms. Moreau, we've searched the shed at the back of your property. We found numerous irregularities, a freshly washed floor, faint stains on the walls, and hair recovered from the drain. How do you explain that?" Isabel straightened her back, her voice smooth and practiced. "I clean that shed regularly, Sergeant. I don't like filth. The hair could belong to any of the farmhands. It's a common occurrence." O'Connell observed her, noting the complete lack of change in her expression. He pressed on. "But according to our witness, that shed is always locked after working hours. Yet on the night Leo disappeared, you were in there until late. Why?" Isabel paused for a moment, then offered a thin smile. "I was having trouble sleeping, so I decided to do some organizing." Is it a crime for a homeowner to work on her own property in the middle of the night? Her answer was polished, as if rehearsed. O'Connell slid a forensic photograph across the table. "These are the stains our team found. A preliminary analysis shows a spatter pattern consistent with biological fluid. It's highly unlikely that came from a cleaning agent." Isabel glanced at the photo and shrugged. "I don't understand forensic science. All I know is that I used a powerful cleaner. If your team interprets it differently, perhaps it's an effect of the chemicals." A younger detective sitting beside O'Connell couldn't contain his frustration. "Ma'am, we're talking about a missing child. Your stepson. Shouldn't you be the most worried person in this room?" Isabel turned her gaze to him, her smile becoming thin and brittle. "I am worried. But not everyone expresses their grief in the same way. I choose to remain calm. That doesn't mean I don't care." O'Connell signaled for his colleague to remain silent. He leaned closer to Isabel. "Let's talk about your relationship with Leo. Multiple witnesses have stated that it was strained. He wanted to go to university out of province, and you refused. You had an argument the night before he disappeared. Is that correct?" This time, the pause was longer. Isabel's hands tightened in her lap. Though her face remained a mask of composure, he saw a flicker of something else. "Leo was a headstrong boy," she finally said. "He was demanding something I felt was excessive. I simply wanted him to focus on his studies here. It wasn't a major fight. I was just disciplining him." O'Connell seized on that small tell, the uncontrolled clenching of her hands, the slight hesitation. He knew the impenetrable shield she had built around herself was beginning to crack. He softened his tone, shifting his approach. "Raising a teenager is difficult, especially when they're not your own flesh and blood. But honestly, many people saw your rules as overly restrictive. Leo felt like he was living in a prison. You must have been aware of that." Isabel's eyes flashed with a sudden, sharp anger that she quickly suppressed. "That's the opinion of outsiders. I was only doing what I thought was right." The room fell silent again, the ticking of the clock filling the tense void. O'Connell leaned back, closing the file. He decided to stop there for the night. Without the official lab results, pushing her further would be fruitless. "All right, Ms. Moreau. Your statement has been recorded. But remember, this investigation is far from over. Physical evidence doesn't lie. We will speak again." Isabel gave a short nod. Two female officers entered and escorted her from the room. Her steps were slow, her expression still cool, but O'Connell noticed that her gaze was no longer as steady as it had been. There was an unease there, a fear she was struggling to conceal. After the door closed, the emotional young detective said quietly, "Sir, that woman is incredibly calculating." Every answer felt prepared. O'Connell stared at the wooden table, tapping his finger slowly. "You're right. She's smart and disciplined. But no lie can hold forever. We'll wait for the lab results. That will be the hammer that shatters her shield." The night wore on. O'Connell left the interrogation room not to go home, but to return to his team's command center. The large whiteboard, covered in photos and notes, was waiting. He looked at the picture of Leo at the center of the board and whispered under his breath, "Hang on, kid. The truth is coming." 2 days after the search, a thick, sealed envelope arrived on Detective Sergeant Liam O'Connell's desk. The words "Forensic Lab Results" were stamped in red across the front. O'Connell opened it carefully, his heart pounding as he examined the contents sheet by sheet. The evidence they had so painstakingly collected now spoke with irrefutable clarity. The stains on the shed walls were confirmed as human blood, and the DNA profile was a perfect match for Leo Dubois. The hairs found tangled in the drain were also his, a match to a sample taken from his hairbrush. All the evidence pointed to a single, horrifying conclusion: Leo had never left his home. He had met a violent end right there on the property. O'Connell closed the file and took a long, deep breath. He now held the weapon that would demolish Isabel's wall of lies. That afternoon, the investigative team gathered in front of the whiteboard. O'Connell pinned up the summary of the lab report. "Colleagues," he announced, his voice grim, "this is our answer. Tonight, we interrogate Isabel Morrow again. This time, there will be no room for her to lie." Every head in the room nodded, their faces taut with anticipation. As evening fell, Isabel was once again led into the interrogation room. She tried to appear calm, but the dark circles under her eyes betrayed sleepless nights. O'Connell wasted no time. He opened the lab file and pushed it across the table toward her. "Ms. Morrow, the stains in your shed were not from detergent. They were human blood. The DNA is a match to Leo. The hair in the drain also belongs to Leo. Please explain." Isabel stared at the document for a long time, then managed a faint, dismissive smile. "Lab results can be wrong. Samples can be contaminated. I have the right to request a second opinion." O'Connell leaned forward, his voice low and piercing. "Ma'am, this isn't a high school science experiment. The Provincial Forensics Lab does not mix up samples. This result is final, and you know exactly what it means. Leo didn't just disappear. He was injured inside your house." Isabel took a ragged breath, desperately searching for a way out. Even if there was blood, perhaps he had a small cut. He was a clumsy boy. Hair can fall out. Maybe he was playing near the shed. O'Connell's gaze was unyielding. If it was a small cut, why were there blood spatters on the ceiling? That pattern only occurs with significant force, not a simple scrape. And the hair we found wasn't just a single strand, it was mixed with tissue caught in the grinder's filter. Do you also call that a coincidence? The room was silent. Isabel's lips moved but no words came out. For the first time, her facade of confidence crumbled completely. O'Connell softened his tone slightly. "Ms. Morrow, I don't need a convoluted story. Confessing won't bring Leo back, but it will bring justice for him, for his family, and for your own conscience." Isabel looked down, then back up, her voice raspy. I can't speak without my lawyer. I want Mr. Thorne here." O'Connell nodded slowly. "Of course. You are entitled to legal counsel. But remember, no lawyer in the world can erase this evidence. The interrogation ended for the night. Isabel still had not confessed, but the cracks in her armor were now wide open. Her eyes darted away every time a photo of Leo was shown. Her lips trembled whenever O'Connell said the word blood. As she was led away, O'Connell immediately reconvened with his team. "We'll press her again tomorrow. Her defenses are collapsing. One final push is all it will take." The detectives nodded, a renewed sense of purpose in their eyes. They knew the moment of truth was near. Later that night, O'Connell sat alone in his office, staring at the photo of Leo on the whiteboard. The teenager in the picture seemed to be looking back at him, his faint smile a haunting reminder of a life cut short. The words from his final message echoed in O'Connell's mind, "Find the answer in this house." O'Connell clenched his fist. "Don't worry, kid," he whispered to the photo. "We've found your trail. And soon, everyone will know the truth." The next morning, the interrogation room was prepared again. The forensic photos were still displayed on a board, now accompanied by detailed diagrams of the blood spatter patterns. An empty chair waited opposite the long table. Detective Sergeant Liam O'Connell sat calmly, his eyes fixed on the door. He knew today could be the day it all broke open. Shortly after 9 o'clock, the door opened. 2 officers escorted Isabel inside. She moved like a sleepwalker, her hair disheveled, her face pale and drawn, with dark hollows under her eyes. She sat down slowly, her fingers intertwining in her lap as if to stop them from shaking. O'Connell didn't start with a question. He let the silence hang in the air, heavy and oppressive. 5 seconds. 10. The only sound was the steady tick of the wall clock. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "Ms. Morrow, all other possibilities have been eliminated. The DNA, the hair, the blood spatter patterns, they all point to one inescapable fact. There is only one question left. What really happened that night?" Isabel kept her head down, her fingers tracing invisible lines on the table. She remained silent for a long time before her voice, cracked and broken, emerged. "I never meant to kill him." The room went still. The other detectives exchanged a quick glance but remained poised, waiting. O'Connell leaned forward slightly, giving her the space to continue. "Tell me." Isabel took a long, shuddering breath. "We argued that night. He was insistent about going to university on the other side of the country. I was furious. I felt like he was just looking for an excuse to get away from the house. Away from me. He said he'd rather live on the streets than live with me." Her eyes filled with tears. "I felt so disrespected. He was comparing me to his mother, who's been gone for years. I just lost control. I slapped him. He fell backward. His head hit the corner of the coffee table. There was blood. I panicked. I thought he had just passed out, but he wasn't waking up." Her tears began to fall freely, splashing onto the polished wood of the table. Her voice trembled violently. "I was scared. So scared. If people found out, I'd lose everything. The house, the business, my reputation. I just wanted to survive." O'Connell let the confession hang in the air for a long moment before he spoke again, his tone gentle but firm. "Ms. Morrow, panic is understandable. But what isn't understandable is why you cleaned the shed, erased the evidence, and hid the body. That wasn't panic. That was a conscious decision. Why did you choose that path?" Isabel stared blankly at the wall, her voice a hollow whisper. "Because I knew that as soon as Leo turned 19, everything would go to him. I would have nothing. And when he said he hated me, I felt like my life was already over. I was just trying to hold on to what I had." The detective scribbled furiously, capturing every word. Though incomplete, this was a confession. It established the fight, the fatal blow, and the motive of greed. O'Connell pressed deeper, his voice hardening slightly. "Ma'am, survival doesn't mean destroying someone else's life. Leo was a child you were supposed to protect. You can't tell half the truth. Sooner or later, everything will come out." Isabel covered her face with her hands, her sobs now silent, her shoulders shaking. She said nothing more. The interrogation lasted for another hour. Every time O'Connell mentioned the shed or the feed grinder, Isabel refused to elaborate, only whispering that she couldn't bear to remember. But her refusal only strengthened the team's conviction that the darkest details were still being concealed. Finally, O'Connell closed his file. He turned to his team and spoke in a clear, instructional tone. "Tomorrow we bring in the witness. We'll let her hear it from the man who saw her with his own eyes. Her defenses are already gone. One more push, and she won't be able to hold back." Isabel was led from the room without another glance. The detectives looked at O'Connell, their faces a mixture of grim satisfaction and renewed determination. They knew the full truth was just one step away. That night, O'Connell stood before the whiteboard in his office. Leo's face looked out from the center of the collage of evidence. He stared at the photo for a long time, then whispered into the quiet room, "Be patient, kid. Tomorrow, this secret breaks for good." The day of reckoning arrived. As planned, the investigative team brought in their key witness, the former farmhand, Stan Kowalski. The aging man was seated just a few feet away from Isabel Morrow in the interrogation room. When Isabel's eyes met Stan's, she quickly looked away, her face ashen, her fingers twisting together in her lap. Detective Sergeant Liam O'Connell began the interrogation, his voice leaving no room for evasion. "Ms. Morrow, yesterday you admitted only to slapping Leo. But Mr. Kowalski saw much more than that. Late that night, you were in the shed. You had the machine running, you were wearing a rain slicker, and you were cleaning something. How do you explain that?" Isabel fidgeted, her breathing shallow and rapid. She started to shake her head in denial, but O'Connell pressed on, his tone sharp. "The forensic evidence is conclusive. We have an eyewitness. There is no other path for you but the truth." A heavy silence descended upon the room. Stan looked at Isabel with an expression of profound disappointment, like a father watching a lost child. Finally, Isabel closed her eyes, and a hoarse whisper escaped her lips. "That night after I slapped Leo, he fell. His head hit the table. I tried to wake him, but he wasn't moving. His body was cold. I realized he was gone." She paused, her hands gripping the sides of her chair. Her tears started to fall again. "I was terrified. I saw my whole life crumbling. I imagined going to prison, everyone pointing at me. So I dragged his body to the shed. My only thought was that if there was no body, no evidence, then no one could prove anything." Her body began to tremble violently, her voice cracking. "I turned on the machine in there. I tried to get rid of all the evidence. After, I washed the floor with water and bleach. I threw away anything that might be a clue. I thought I could make it all disappear." She looked down, her tears falling in a steady stream. "I was so wrong. It was all because I was afraid of losing everything. Afraid of losing the house, the business, my reputation. Every time I looked at Leo, I saw him as a threat who would one day take it all away. That night, I lost control." O'Connell leaned forward, his voice sharp but controlled. "Ms. Morrow, this was not just a moment of panic. You didn't just slap him. You planned what came next. You cleaned, you concealed, you concocted a story about him running away. That wasn't a spontaneous act. That was a choice." Isabel was silent for a long time. Finally, she gave a slow, defeated nod. Yes, she whispered. I admit it. I chose that path. And now it's too late. The room was quiet. The detectives wrote swiftly, their pens scratching across their notepads. Stan lowered his head, his face a mask of sorrow. O'Connell let out a long, slow breath and signaled to his team. Everyone present knew this confession was the final piece of the long, dark puzzle. The forensic evidence, the eyewitness, and now the verbal admission. It was all complete. As Isabel was led from the room, she stood up weakly. She no longer tried to fight or deny. Her face was a blank slate of resignation, her eyes fixed on the floor, as if the world around her had ceased to exist. O'Connell stood and addressed his team. Everyone, our work here isn't over. We compile the full case file. We take all this evidence to the Crown. We let the justice system deliver its verdict. What matters is that the truth has finally been revealed. The detectives nodded, their hearts heavy from the grim confession, but firm in the knowledge that justice now had a solid foundation. That night, O'Connell returned to his office. He looked at the photo of Leo on the whiteboard. In his heart, he whispered, "It's over, kid. The truth is out." Months after her full confession, Isabel Morrow's case went to trial. The courtroom at the B.C. Supreme Court in Chilliwack was packed with community members, journalists, and Leo's grieving family. Everyone wanted to witness the final chapter of the dark story that had haunted the Fraser Valley for months. Isabel was led in, wearing a standard-issue prison jumpsuit. She was a shadow of her former self, the elegant, poised woman was gone, replaced by a weary, hollow-eyed figure whose steps were heavy with defeat. There were no smiles, no tears, just a silent, vacant acceptance of her fate. The judge opened the proceedings, his voice stern. The Crown prosecutor laid out the entire case, from the initial argument to the forensic evidence discovered in the shed, the testimony of Stan Kowalski, and finally, Isabel's own detailed confession. The narrative was seamless, irrefutable. Isabel listened without reaction, occasionally bowing her head or blinking back tears, but she never once tried to deny the facts. When the judge gave her the opportunity to speak in her own defense, she only said, her voice a quiet murmur, "I am sorry. But I know my sorrow will never be enough to bring Leo back." The courtroom was silent. There were no cheers, no applause, only the collective sigh of a community burdened by the tragedy. In the front row, Arthur and Margaret Du Bois sat holding hands, tears streaming down their faces, not of satisfaction, but of an unhealable grief for the grandson they had lost. At last, however, the truth was known, and their boy had found justice. The judge delivered the verdict. Isabel Morrow was found guilty of second-degree murder and committing an indignity to a human body. A sentence of life in prison was handed down, with no possibility of parole for 20 years. The words echoed through the courtroom. Isabel remained motionless, all her fight gone, leaving only a fragile, broken woman who had accepted her fate. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Arthur. With a voice thick with emotion, he said, "We're old. All we ever wanted was for our grandson to be safe. We hope no other family has to go through what we have. Don't ever let money make you blind to what truly matters." His words resonated deeply, for behind this case, the community saw a stark lesson in how fragile human nature can be when consumed by fear and greed. For Detective Sergeant Liam O'Connell and his team, the case was a profound reminder. There is no such thing as a perfect crime. No matter how cleverly a perpetrator tries to cover their tracks, the truth will always find a way to surface, whether through a tiny piece of evidence, a courageous witness, or a confession finally broken by the weight of guilt. A few weeks after the verdict, the Grand Du Bois house was sold. Arthur and Margaret chose to live a quiet life in a small bungalow on the edge of town. They donated a significant portion of the sale proceeds to a local youth shelter in memory of the grandson, who never got the chance to realize his dreams. The story of Isabel